Providence Bruins fizzled out of the Calder Cup playoffs on Sunday, and it left the big club with some big question marks heading into next season.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Monday, May 12th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins your first listen every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. On today's podcast, we are going to discuss the end of the Providence Bruins season, culminating with Sunday's loss to the Charlotte Checkers in pretty embarrassing fashion when you look at it. It raises some questions about some of the Bruins' hopefuls for next season, and also about the future of perhaps the coaching staff down there as well. So we're going to break down the loss, the positives, and the negatives from how the Providence Bruins season ended with 8 playoff games. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. I've been covering this team and the NHL for various outlets for about 20 years now. Now, on Sunday, the Providence Bruins ended their playoff run with a 5-2 loss in Charlotte. And this was a Game 5 that had been forced after the Providence Bruins had gone down 2-0 in the series. So you'd think that they'd have the momentum coming into this one, putting the pressure on Charlotte, who is, of course, Florida's AHL team. But no, the Providence Bruins came out with a stunning lack of urgency in a do-or-die scenario, and they were held to just one shot in the entire first period. They got outshot 20-1 to start this game. Not even to start it, like well through the game. They were being outshot 20-1 and ended up with 8 shots on goal total in this do-or-die game. Charlotte, to their credit, came out flying, played extremely well defensively, and had a goaltender in Kaapo Kähkönen, who had an outstanding series for the Charlotte Checkers, starting all 5 games, finished with a .926 save percentage and a .178 goals against average. Had a 32 save shutout in Game 2. He was the AHL goalie of the year in 2019-20, and he was huge for this team as they moved on. For the Bruins, they had the reigning AHL goalie of the year, but unfortunately, Michael DiPietro was injured in this series, third period of Game 4, and Brandon Bussi was forced to start the game. It wasn't, something that you could pin on him fully, but can't help but wonder if it would have gone differently if Michael DiPietro had been healthy. Bussi was decent, but DiPietro's absence was indeed huge. They clawed back from that 3-0 deficit. The game was lost here in the first 2 periods. They were outshot 38 overall, 20-1 shot differential to start the game. That's not just a slow start. Like, that's a unique collapse. They were suffocated by Charlotte's defensive structure. But still, 8 shots in a playoff elimination game is borderline unacceptable. They did show some fight late, and credit to Vinnie Letieri for 2 goals. But by then, it was too little too late. Throw on 2 empty netters in this one, and that was pretty much all she wrote. again, that shot differential, unacceptable in any game, let alone a do or die playoff matchup. Where was the energy? That's kind of on the players, and it's also kind of on the coaching. And it doesn't speak very well of Ryan Muganel, who perhaps was in the mix for the Boston Bruins head coaching job as a bit of a dark horse. If Providence had won this game and then gone on for a deeper run in the Calder Cup playoffs, it would be hard to keep him out of the running for that. But the way that they lost this game probably takes that off the table, and maybe there's some questions about whether or not he should be back. Felt like the team was caught off guard a bit by Charlotte's pressure. They never recovered, and there were some mental lapses that doomed them early. Two empty netters made the score look worse than it was, but this game was pretty much over by the time the second period ended. A missed opportunity. Providence showed flashes of strong playoff play. They came back in the first round. They came back in the second round, but they did not bring their best when it mattered most. And that's very unfortunate because we were hoping to see some steps forward for some of these young guys who are hopefuls for the NHL roster next season. There was no fire, there was no structure, there was no spark, and that's really what hurts the most. A no-show when it mattered most, and that's a red flag for players who are looking to make the jump to the NHL next season, and for a team that was built for success down in the AHL level. They were missing a couple guys. Perhaps Marat Husnudinov would have been a good play there. You had Dan Schluck-Mellis, who went to Latvia or to play for Latvia at the World Championships. Perhaps that would have been those guys would have been difference makers for this team, but still, with the players that you had in the lineup, there's every reason to believe that they should have been able to put up more of a fight. There were some positives, there were some negatives though, and one of them being Fabian Lysell's play in the in the Calder Cup playoffs for the Providence Bruins. We'll touch on this more coming up, but only 2 assists, only how many shots on goal did he have? Yeah, only 2 assists in 7 games, one of which he was made a healthy scratch. And coming off the impressive end to his NHL season, you would think that he would have had more of an impact for Providence in the playoffs, but that was not the case. He wasn't alone in kind of not stepping up, but certainly we would have liked to have seen more from a guy who got an extended look at the end of the NHL regular season and who finished pretty strong with a few points over his last 4 games, but not really stepping up to the point where he was healthy scratch. Now, is that on the coaching staff for not getting him ready and playing him in prime positions? Is that on myself for not showing up? Altogether, it was a disappointing result for the Providence Bruins, and there are some big question marks heading into next season in terms of guys who could be in the running for Boston Bruins roster spots, guys who could be in the running for coaching or assistant coaching jobs. A very disappointing way for Providence to end the season. And we'll touch on some of those negatives as well as some positives here as the podcast continues. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on streaming services. Now I budget smarter, cut out ones I wasn't watching as much, and save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Everydayers will know it is available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today we're talking about a missed opportunity for the Providence Bruins, who were able to force a Game 5 after going down 2-0 to the Charlotte Checkers in the second round of the Calder Cup playoffs. But they did not bring their best when it mattered most. And there were a couple of guys that really disappointed for them and who did not step up. And among those, Fabian Lysell was probably the biggest disappointment. He has all the tools, but if he's not producing in the AHL playoffs, how close is he really to being NHL ready? The Bruins gave him an extended look kind of by default heading into the end of the season. They just did not have enough talented bodies to throw out there. And they were, of course, also not really looking to perform optimally. So it was a great chance for him to get some playing time. Unfortunately, he only had 2 assists, goalless in 7 games, managed just 7 shots total, a troubling stat line for a player billed as a potential top 6 winger. And among those decisions, or in the midst of all this, he was healthy scratched by head coach Ryan Muganel in was it game 4 or game 3? I can't really remember, but not a good look for a guy in the playoffs. Like, to get scratched in the playoffs is one of the worst things that could happen, because that is when you need your best players to be at their best. And to have a guy who was a first round pick at the NHL entry draft 4 years ago, limited NHL playing time, for him to not be someone that you are relying on to score and lead your team in the playoffs is kind of a red flag. And I've been an apologist for Fabian Lysell since he was drafted. I've often talked about how we need to be patient with these guys, how it takes a long time for some players to develop and to really find their groove. He was a healthy scratch in game 4. He did return to the lineup for game 5, but had a very minimal impact. And you could argue that perhaps it would have been better for them to just get him out there and see what he could do. But they did win game 4, brought him back for game 5, and out he goes, and out go the Boston Bruins. There were some other disappointing players. I was expecting a bit more from Fraser Minton. He also only had 2 assists in 8 games for Providence throughout the playoffs. Luck Melish, of course, had 1 assist in 4 games. It would have been nice to see him stick around. Of course, the biggest disappointment was seeing Michael DiPietro go out early due to injury. He had been playing pretty well. Of course, he was the AHL goalie of the year this season, and it's very possible that he could be the backup for the Boston Bruins this coming season if he were to re-sign. Of course, he will be unrestricted free agent this summer, as will Bussy be. And also, if Joonas Korpisalo is traded, there's a real opportunity here. In the 7 games DiPietro did play, he had a .928 save percentage, a 185 goals against average, just did not get enough offensive support that he needed in the playoffs, as evidenced by guys like Lysell, Minton combining for only 4 total assists. So those are real disappointments and question marks for this team heading into next season. Certainly, Lysell, 0 goals, 7 shots. Matt Poitras was on the other end of a pretty bad hit. He was able to stay in. He had 4 points in 8 games, -5 rating. Showed some real promise with some fantastic moves to set up. I believe it was an Oliver Wahlstrom goal. That's a guy we'll talk about coming up. But again, not necessarily dominate. And that's the kind of play you need in order to prove that you're ready for full-time NHL duty. Outside of a top few, a lot of these guys really struggled. Ian Mitchell was decent, but didn't really move the needle. And a lot of question marks for this team in terms of who might be able to step up and become a Boston Bruin next season. There's a bunch of restricted free agents: John Farinacci, Georgi Merkulov, and Oliver Wahlstrom. Unfortunately for the Bruins, Merkulov was injured and therefore was unavailable for the playoffs. He certainly would have been a potential difference maker as their leading scorer from the regular season. Farinacci scored a goal for the big club in the regular season, only 1 goal in 8 games and 0 assists to his name. He is also a restricted free agent. You also have some unrestricted free agents in Tyler Pitlick, Riley Tufte, Vinnie Letieri. We'll talk about the latter two here coming up in a moment. On the back end, Daniil Misuel and Drew Bavaro as restricted free agents. Michael Callahan as a unrestricted free agent. Ian Mitchell as a restricted free agent. And then those 2 guys in net. Michael DiPietro and Brandon Bussi. I would expect there will be some of these guys up with the big club next season. But Lysell didn't do himself any favors in terms of securing a spot. Matt Poitras, I would argue, put himself in more of a position to do so. Fraser Minton disappointed as well, although he is got the tools to be up there next season. But with a better showing in the playoffs, this team and some of these players would have done much better in terms of impressing Don Sweeney and company, securing a spot on the NHL roster. And this flame out, the way that they went out, it wasn't the fact that they lost in 5 games to Charlotte. Charlotte's a good team. And again, Kakinen had played very, very well in net for them. But starting the game 20-1, recording only 8 shots on goal in basically a game 7 situation is just unacceptable. And it doesn't speak well to some of these prime players on this team, like Minton, like Lysell. Vinnie Letieri, to his credit, stepped up with the 2 goals, but he's not like a potential core player for the Bruins moving forward. And it doesn't speak well to the coaching staff. And again, you can probably scratch Ryan Muganel off the list of potential Boston Bruins head coaching candidates after the way this one ended. If it was like 5-5, guys were stepping up, shooting the puck on net, and they lost in overtime, that's one thing. But losing like this, not a good look at all. And it's a tough one for Providence and for Bruins fans who are looking to have some of their players to cheer for here without a presence for the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Who did step up? Who did play well? We'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. All right, let's end on a positive note by discussing some things that did go well for the Providence Bruins. Vinnie Letieri delivered big time, 7 points in 8 games, brought some consistency to the mix and veteran leadership. He as always, stepped up. He played very well for, maybe not very well, but he played well for Boston when he was called up late in the season. He is still, let's see, what's his contract situation looking like? He's an unrestricted free agent, 30 years old, versatile forward. He could get a look elsewhere from an NHL team if indeed he is looking for more of a role at the NHL level. Maybe he goes back to Minnesota. You heard the story perhaps of Jacob Lauko living in his house, and then Lauko was traded back to Boston. So maybe Letieri just goes home, plays in the Wild organization, and reclaims his house. But he played pretty well for Providence for sure. Michael DiPietro, of course, had some solid moments between the pipes and could be in the mix for a backup role if the Bruins move Eunice Korpisalo this summer. While Fabian Lysell didn't score, he at least stayed healthy and gained more playoff reps after a tough regular season. Still upside there. It's just going to take still perhaps some more time than Bruins fans hoped or that they're willing to accept, because, I mean, some players are already, or some people are already writing him off as a bit of a bust, which I think is kind of unfortunate because he still is young and has time to grow. Riley Tufte led the team in goals, finished with a +2, one of the few who played with size and finish around the net. He is also an unrestricted free agent. He was signed last summer to a 1-year, $775,000 contract. Still only 27 and a guy who could contribute. I would not be surprised if they look to re-sign him and bring him back on a 2-way deal on the cheap if he doesn't generate any interest elsewhere. I thought Oliver Wahlstrom was effective with 4 points in 7 games, a team best +3. He also had 3 goals to finish second on the team, tie for second with Letieri and behind Riley Tufte. He's a guy that, did not really show much when he was claimed off waivers from the New York Islanders with the Boston Bruins, but he did have 15 points in 19 games for Providence after being placed on waivers and sent down. 3 goals, 1 assist in the Calder Cup playoffs. So he could be a guy. The Bruins are looking for depth on the right side, and he stepped up and showed that he should be in the mix for another contract moving forward. Matt Poitras, like I said, kind of up and down, but certainly a guy that showed flashes of elite skill. Not consistent enough yet at even strength, and still needs to add some size to avoid being knocked around. Riley Tufte made a case for a future fourth-line role in Boston. Strong, smart, opportunistic. Letieri drove offense. Had some defensive issues, though. Poitras still has top 6 NHL potential, but the AHL playoffs showed he needs to round out his game. And to end it off, I think Oliver Wahlstrom quietly improved his stock after a rocky regular season. Lysell, though, for me, was the biggest letdown. Supposed to be a breakout. He looked overwhelmed at times. Not a good sign for someone knocking on the NHL door. Veterans like Patrick Brown and Jeffrey Viel were largely passengers. Providence needed leadership, not penalties and poor defensive play. And outside the top line, there was very little offense. The depth scoring dried up pretty fast. In a lot of ways, this mirrored the Boston Bruins in past playoffs and in this regular season. They were outshot, showed they weren't ready to battle. There was no fire. There was no structure. There was no spark. And all the momentum gained from Game 4 was not followed up on a no-show when it mattered most. And that's a red flag for some of these guys who are looking to make the step up, who are looking to get NHL roster spots, NHL coaching jobs. Boston Bruins are going to have to take a long look at who took a steps forward, who took steps back. Lysell's playoff performance raises questions about his NHL readiness, and the lack of team urgency in Game 5 should be a wake-up call for the entire organization. So, a disappointing end to the Providence Bruins season. Now, all eyes will be on the head coaching search for this team. They're going to take some time to analyze everything in the organization top down. Who's the best candidate to get the most out of the NHL group? Maybe they need a new voice on the AHL team. These players aren't really developing like we'd want them to. And that's a statement on Ryan Muganel and his staff as well. They'll also take a look at some of the head coaching candidates, get ready for the draft. Coming up this week, we're going to discuss Tuukka Rask being snubbed by the NHL quarter century vote, which was just unbelievable. We'll also keep an eye on the Leafs-Panthers series because, of course, there are implications for the Bruins there, as if the Panthers are able to come back and win this series after being down 0-2, it would mean a first-round pick for the Boston Bruins in the future as a result of the Brad Marchand trade. That's it for today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, my friends. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I hope you had a fantastic weekend. Again, happy Mother's Day to all the moms and mom figures out there. Thank you for making Locked On Bruins your first listen today. And for your second listen, check out all the new Locked On NHL game night coverage. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. You can find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL, wherever you get podcasts, and on YouTube. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every day, and we'll be back tomorrow with a brand new episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.